And I'm Dolly Haddad,
the other admin for Action Together Connecticut. And before we get to our speakers, we want to thank the City of Middletown and Mayor Drew for helping us coordinate this event. We also want to thank the Middletown Police Department for being here, not only to show their support, but to help keep us all safe. This is a peaceful vigil, and violence and hate will not be tolerated. If you see or hear anything, can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Yell if you can't hear me. Should I start? Come forward, guys. I'm sorry. We were thanking the City of Middletown and Middletown's Mayor, Dan Drew, for helping us coordinate this event. And we also wanted to thank the Middletown Police Department. They're here not only showing their support, but also to help keep us safe. I just want to remind everyone, this is a peaceful vigil, and hate and violence will not be tolerated. If you see or hear something that gives you any cause for concern, please find a police officer, let them know, and they'll handle the situation, but we don't expect anything to happen. But that's just, housekeeping stuff. We have a number of people we need to thank for getting this event together in less than 24 hours. Thank you to Aaron Livensberger, Bobby Peterson, and Lisa Loomis-Davern for helping coordinate speakers and other logistics.
There's more. Please feel free to step up if you can't hear. There's plenty of room. We also want to thank a bunch of other people for their help with the logistics. Jeff Luxembourg, Joe Samolis, Billy Russo. We'd like to thank Curtis Waybright for handling the sound system, Kristen Palmer from Oddfellows for donating our platform, and Kathy Lekowitz for helping with setup and spreading the word. You'll all notice that there have been postcards handed out. We want to make sure that you walk away from here with some actions to take after this vigil. That's kind of what we do, Action Together. So just please make sure you visit the websites listed on there and decide if you want to make a donation. They're all helping out with what's going on down in Virginia. Thank you to all of the speakers who have volunteered their time to be here at last minute, and thank you to all of you for showing up and being here. It's moments and events like this that help us all to remember that we are not a nation of hate, and we can unite in love and peace. So thank you. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mayor Dan Drew, if you'd like to join us.
Thank you, Melinda and Dolly. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank Action Together for putting this rally together today. I want to thank you all for being here to support peace and love. And I want to thank the Middletown Police Department for being here to keep everyone safe. The first thing I want to do is ask for a moment of silence in the memory of Heather Heyer, Trooper Cullen, and Trooper Bates. Thank you. Dolly touched on this a little bit about how this is not a nation of hate. This is a nation of love. This is a nation of people who care for one another. But that's not universal, and it's not universal in this time. And we have to recognize the moment that we're living in for what it is and call it out. Because if we don't recognize what exactly is happening here, or if we recognize it and we're afraid to say it, then we do a disservice to the people whose lives were lost, whose lives will be lost, and we do a disservice to everyone who's ever been subjugated or put down and has fought for their rights. And the simple fact of the matter is, in August of 2017, a neo-Nazi murdered an American citizen on the streets of an American city, and the President of the United States failed to condemn it.
Right.
There's no such thing in this circumstance as violence on most sides. There's no such thing. There are white supremacists terrorizing people, and claiming that the country belongs to them when it belongs to all of us. They came to their rally in Charlottesville yesterday, and they went to the UVA campus on Friday night in riot gear and with brass knuckles and with weapons, spoiling for a fight. They did it because that behavior has been condoned by the Chief Executive Officer of the United States of America. And that is not okay. It's immoral, and it's not who we are. This is the first time in my life I've ever been too tall for something, so I had to adjust this a few times. The simple fact of the matter is that the President of the United States isn't condoning white supremacy, and he's not tacitly being quiet about white supremacy. He is a white supremacist. And it's wrong. And you need to look no further than the response from the hate groups who were active in Charlottesville and around the country yesterday, because they appreciated his wishy-washy, half-hearted, half-baked condemnation of the violence there. When you blame everybody, you're blaming no one, and that's what they were excited about, and that's what's wrong about the whole thing. It exemplifies everything that's wrong with us right now. But the people who pushed back, the people who went to Charlottesville to fight for what's right, the people who went into the streets, the woman whose life was stolen from her yesterday, all of those people gave of themselves and are giving of themselves for a higher purpose, in recognition of the fact that this country is a country of love. And despite all its imperfections, and despite our spotty history on some of these issues, this is a country that has moved forward since the dawn of the Republic. This is a country that recognizes that we care for one another and that we have a moral obligation to one another. No matter what you look like, no matter what you think, no matter who you love, no matter what. We are all people, we are all Americans, and we all have to stand by each other, which is why the hate emanating from Washington and the hate emanating from these groups around the country concentrated in Charlottesville right now is not emblematic of who we are. And the people who propagate that hate are people whose stock in trade is fear. That fear is what creates that hatred. And then they use that hatred to create more fear. It's a vicious cycle, and it's done so that a very small number of people can retain power for themselves by turning the rest of us against one another. What's happening down there now does not and will not define who we are as Americans. The only thing that can define us right now is how we respond to what's happening. It's how we take this step and move forward. It's how we recognize this moment and decide to move forward. And we will not become the victims of hate, we will not become the victims of fear, and we will allow neither to paralyze us or to lead us into a place where morality is absent. Human behavior is determined by two things: who you are and your environment. And right now, our environment is poisonous. So we have to draw on ourselves, we have to draw on each other, and remember that who we are on the inside and who we want to be is what will change our environment. And that is what's going to make things better. When we stand together and when we recognize that fear and hatred have no place in the United States of America, especially not now. And we're going to make sure it's that way. Please remember the people I mentioned in the beginning. Please remember their names, and please don't forget them as we move forward and battle this mindset. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you again, Mayor Drew. That was beautiful, well said, and we really appreciate your remarks. And now we are going to have Reverend Julia Berkey from First Church of Middletown, and she's just going to offer some opening remarks and a kind of a prayer to bring us all together.
On Friday night, as neo-Nazis and white supremacists were gathering with torches, there were people located inside of a church, singing together, praying together, grounding each other and themselves in radical love that says God's blessing is not for a select few, but for everyone. And in times like these, we have to remember the particular people that God is blessing, the black and brown bodies, the Jewish people who the neo-Nazis are saying do not belong here. The beautiful diversity that we know enriches us is being condemned. So we today, I invite you to also be part of this counter-protest, this resistance that is grounded in love. Today at church, Reverend Thea and I, we read the Beatitudes. And these Beatitudes were the first sermon that Jesus said. And among some of these blessings, he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice, for you will be filled." And today, you are hungering and thirsting for justice. Christians and Jews and Muslims and pagans, those who are spiritual but not religious, are hungering and thirsting for justice. And this is not a Republican or Democratic issue. The issue of white supremacy is a sin and a sickness, fighting for the soul of our nation. And we, people of Middletown and beyond, are gathered today in love, which is our spiritual DNA and which will overcome all things. But today is a day for anger, for righteousness, and for solidarity. And we stand in solidarity with those around the nation who are ready to repent for the sins of white supremacy. Let us do this work in our homes, in our churches, in our places of work, in our towns, and in our cities. Receive now this blessing. As you feel your feet on this earth and your head in the sky, connect yourself with the source of life and receive this prayer. Oh God, you are love. Your love is where we begin and end. Bless us with your vision for the world of radical inclusivity, where all of your children are united in love. Ignite in our hearts a righteous anger that does not go away, and help us to work for justice at all times. Ground us now in your hope, for this life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who walk the journey with us. So let us be swift to kindness as we work for racial justice everywhere. We say together, amen.
Thank you, Reverend Julia. That was really beautiful and a great way to start this off. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Erin Leibensbarger, who comes to us from Planned Parenthood.
Hi. Hello back there. Can you hear me all right? A little louder? Okay. My name's Erin, and not only am I a proud employee of Planned Parenthood, I'm also a resident of Portland, so come on over. I'm here to share that Planned Parenthood stands with people of color and allies in the face of such appalling attacks that are fueled by hate. We are here in solidarity with the people and organizations that stood up against racism and terror in Virginia yesterday. Racism and bigotry have no place in our democracy and must be ended. We have urgent work to do to denounce and confront white supremacy in America. Yesterday was not an isolated incident, and it was an explicit display of racism that still exists in our nation, which was led by white supremacists who came prepared for confrontation. We must not only condemn these actions, but also work collectively and relentlessly to put an end to white supremacy. At Planned Parenthood, we know that people achieve reproductive freedom when they have full autonomy over their bodies and lives. This is not only access to health care, but it's the ability to live in communities that aren't over-policed, to live without fear of their families being torn apart, and to live without fear of harm from discriminatory policies. We believe that the ability to live and thrive without fear and the ability to access healthcare are basic human rights. We must unite against hate and bigotry and stand up for justice for all people. People have the right to safe homes and safe communities. We must never back down for the right to be safe, whether that's walking down the street, going to school, being a teenager, being a parent. The right to accessible health care, being paid a living wage, having healthy food, the right to living in communities free of pollution, the right to practice religion safely, to give birth, to control one's own body, to love who you're going to love. Those are all basic human rights. Together, as we're here tonight, let us continue to stand side by side and fight to protect the lives, health, and safety of all people in this community, with a focus on communities of color and the Jewish community who were specifically targeted in this attack. Racism, bigotry, and terror have no place in our world and must be ended. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin, for those words. And now we have Mariam Khan from the Common Ground Institute.
Hello, good evening. I live in Windsor. I've been a resident of Windsor for quite some time, so I want to briefly talk about something we recently did in Windsor. A few months back, some citizens of Windsor came together. We drafted a resolution that affirmed Windsor as a welcoming and diverse community. There was a lot of language in there that specified groups that we would not want to be targeted. When we presented it to our town council, we did receive some pushback from some citizens and council members because of certain language that did not sit well with them. The line that didn't sit well was the town of Windsor condemns violence and hate speech, affirms the religious pluralism of the United States and the inalienable right of every person to live, work, and practice their faith without fear, and expresses solidarity with Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Jews, and all those targeted for their national origin, race, or religion. We were asked to write instead that we express solidarity with all people of all religions and not specify specific ones. So we ended up changing the language, and the resolution passed unanimously. However, the fact that there were so many people that opposed that this certain language was in there gives me the reason that this is exactly why it should be there. The fact that it's bothering people that this is there, we're specifying. So there's still much work to be done, but I'm glad to have some great citizens in Windsor that are ready to call out hate when we see it. I would like to ask the citizens of Middletown to do something similar and draft, I would like to ask the citizens of Middletown to do something similar, draft a resolution to denounce hate against people because of their skin color or what they believe or who they love. I would be more than willing to assist in any way or connect you with those who worked on our resolution, if needed. So now I want to speak on Charlottesville. The situation in Virginia does sadden me, but it does not surprise me. Racial superiority is unacceptable. It isn't welcome in Connecticut, it isn't welcome in Virginia or anywhere in the United States. After the news conference in Charlottesville, President Trump was asked to condemn the march, and instead he walked out of the room. I would like to remind our president that these ideas are inconsistent with our values here in the United States. I would like to call on our president to denounce this as an act of hate and call it for what it is. Those marching were white supremacists, and this was an act of domestic terrorism. Lastly, one of the things that was said at the chants or at the march that I saw was end immigration, one people, one nation. I would like to say to the protesters that were saying these chants, do I need to remind you who the real immigrants in this country are? Your ancestors are all immigrants, as am I an immigrant, and America is a country of immigrants, and I wholeheartedly believe that immigrants are what make this country great. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. I would ask if anybody's having a hard time hearing, please come forward. There's still plenty of space, and the sound system is kind of limited in what we can do. So, the next speaker that I'd like to introduce is Thea Raycelis from South Church in Middletown.